I read the Brené Brown books. I hear about shame. I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I get why people have shame, but I don't resonate with that. Like, it just feels like, okay, cool, like, I totally get it, but I'm not there, you know?
The only people psychologists have found to be immune from feeling shame are those who completely lack empathy or the capacity for human connection. So we all experience shame to varying degrees, but it's so uncomfortable, we often protect ourselves from feeling it or even knowing it's there. Vanessa Wheat can look back now and see how she was in denial to her shame as well, covering up any feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness with people-pleasing and perfectionism.
I go into a life of people-pleasing because I want everyone to think that I'm great and I'm good and everything's good and I'm like the best friend ever, and I show up, and so I start living that life. And you know, I think I'm a great mom, but I do feel like a lot of the time I was like living my life for the people outside my home instead of like the people inside my home, my husband and my 3 kids, you know, or putting their whatever was going on with them aside so that I could show up for other people. And so that has been the biggest thing that I have learned these last couple of years, and I'm still growing, but it's learning to show up like for me and my family, for me first, and then my family.
Vanessa came to these realizations in an unexpected way. It was a car accident. She wasn't seriously injured, but for weeks after the crash, something strange was happening.
About 3 years ago, I got in a car accident on a snowy day, and I could not drive my car. Like, I would get in the car to take my kids to school, and I would drive 2 houses. My entire leg would be shaking. And I was like, I would call Zach crying. You need to drive the kids to school.
She decided to find a therapist, trying to make some sense out of this physical response she was having.
I ended up with this woman. I tell her about the accident. I tell her about this sensation that I'm having. I'm like, my entire body is shaking when I try to drive in the snow. And she's like, I can definitely help you with this. But before we go to that, I'd love for you to just tell me your story. So I tell her my story, and she says, I think that we've got some stuff to work on.
Vanessa had thought her inability to drive was related to trauma from the car accident itself. She was shocked to find, though, that as she recounted traumatic parts from her childhood, her body would respond the exact same way.
When I was going through it with her, I was shaking like I would shake when I would try to drive.
Using EMDR therapy, Vanessa worked with her therapist through each specific trauma from her childhood.
You're putting a feeling or a thought to each of these traumatic events, like how you feel about yourself, and then you're working through to change that feeling. So the car accident, my first thoughts were, I'm a horrible driver, I'm a bad mom, who do I think I am? And so as we were just through that one, as we were working through it, I realized that I kind of had this shame, like I was shaming myself. It was a car accident. It was the first snowy day in October. It was a hit and run. Like, it was not anything, you know, that I had done. And then as we're like talking through my dad, and I'm talking, you know, the things that kept coming up is like feeling embarrassed, feeling weird, feeling like the only one. So I started to learn that I had so much shame from all the things that had happened to me. And I had no idea that I had this shame that was building up in my life and was infecting so many of the things that I did. I mean, I think about some of my interactions with my friends. I tend to feel like the lesser, like I always feel like people like other people more. Like that's a natural feeling that I just have. Like that I'm like, oh, everyone wants to be with them and I'm just kind of the add-in, you know? Or I'm never gonna be as cute as anyone else. Like all of that was always running through my head. And And it still does a little bit, but I feel like now that I know exactly what's going on, and now that I know that I actually do have shame, it helped me release that. So I grew up in Grass Valley, California, tiny little town. And a lot of my early memories of my family are great. We lived about an hour away from my mom's side of the family. So I had aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents, and we did all the fun things. What I do remember, and this is a pretty early memory, is my dad coming home from work one day and he had hurt his back. And I remember him sitting like in the kitchen talking about his back hurting and being in a lot of pain, but I didn't quite know what was going on. And from that time forward, he never went to work again. It started kind of a series of back surgeries and starting to take painkillers. At the same time, my mom had to fully go back to work. So my dad became the stay-at-home parent. And I had so much fun with him. I mean, he picked me up from school every day. Like, we had all these fun little things that we would do on the way home. Sometimes he would get me frozen yogurt. He'd come home, we would play in the front yard. In the summer, when my mom was at work, he would take me and my friends to the city pool and we'd go swim. So a lot of really great memories. And I really feel like I was meant to have that time with my dad. Really feel that I was meant to have that with him. I didn't know, but during that time, he was slowly taking more painkillers. Unfortunately, the doctor that he was working with was not regulating how much he was getting them. He was drinking more and more, and I didn't really know all of this was happening. I would say a lot of it kind of happened behind closed doors. I would hear him and my mom fight at night, but I didn't quite understand all of it. I know as an adult I can look back and I have specific memories of him being really goofy, and I realize now that he was drunk or on drugs. And then on top of, being an alcoholic, abusing prescription drugs, he also had smoked for years, and that was also a health problem that was slowly kind of starting to rear its ugly head with him. One night, I was in 4th grade, and my mom woke me up in the middle of the night, and she said, "We're taking Dad to the hospital." He was not breathing. So immediately, we get there. They were shoving a breathing tube down his throat. He's fighting with them. I don't know if he was drunk at the time or what was happening, but I do remember him specifically making eye contact with me and saying, "No, no," and then finally that was when the curtain went and my mom and I went to go into the waiting room.
That night, Vanessa's dad was diagnosed with upper respiratory syndrome. He was sedated and admitted to the ICU, where he stayed in a coma for months.
So that year, 4th grade, my mom would pick me up from school. We would go directly to the hospital. And when he was, more sedated or in this coma, I just remember reading Goosebumps to him and just telling him about my life. Every day I'd come home or come to the hospital and I would tell him about what was going on at school. I would read Goosebumps, and my mom and I would go home. And this whole time he could not talk to me. I think even once he woke up, he had the tube down him. And about 3 months in, they decided to put a trach in. And so I remember going to the hospital that day, and when he said, "I love you," for the first time I had heard his voice in 3 months. And it was so special, such a special time. And slowly from that time, I would say he got real sick, to the point we were Catholic at the time. The priest came and read him his last rites. I mean, we were preparing for my dad to die at that point. And he made a miraculous recovery. So I would say it was about 4 to 5 months in ICU, and then slowly got moved out, and then slowly came home. Once he came home, life was never the same.
Vanessa's dad had to be on oxygen 24/7, and he was able to stay clean for a little while, but eventually he started drinking heavily again.
It just got to the point where my mom, she couldn't trust that he was going to be sober when he picked me up from school, when he drove me to activities. She just couldn't do it anymore. And she asked him to leave.
He didn't just leave, though. He disappeared. They had no idea where he was, and it didn't take long for Vanessa's mom to realize that he'd cleared out their bank accounts as well.
We didn't know where he had flown. We just knew that money was gone, his car was gone, and he wasn't at home. And so it was about 2 weeks where we had no idea where he was. And one day we had a voicemail from him that said, "I'm in Maui. I love you both. I'm gonna stay." Click. And that was it.
Did you have enough awareness of the situation that it made sense to you that your mom asked your dad to leave? Or
No. I knew it was not good. And I knew things were bad. And I wasn't mad at my mom. Definitely there was no anger there. I was very confused about my dad. Very confused why he would leave. I think that's a lot of it. Why he would leave me, why he wouldn't tell us where he was. I didn't really understand, that it was mental health. Like he was having depression, he was battling this disease, all of that.
So much of this time is marked by questions and feelings Vanessa just couldn't make sense of. And even if she could have, she didn't want to talk about the reality of the situation with anyone.
I don't even remember going and telling people at school about it and wanting to talk. I mean, I definitely didn't want to talk about it because, again, whose dad just leaves? That doesn't happen, So one day I'm home and my best friend Haley is with me and we're just playing. We're home by ourselves. We were old enough to stay home at that point. And I look out and my dad had always had a mustache. He had jet black hair and this mustache. So we look out and we see, and he had long hair. We see this guy with short hair, no mustache, fiddling with keys. My mom had changed the keys when he left. And Haley and I are screaming. We think somebody's breaking into the house. And then all of a sudden Haley goes, "I think that's your dad." And we both look and we're like, oh my gosh. You just are like, what do I do? He left. My mom's been trying to figure things out. I know he took our bank accounts. I don't know what, do I go call my mom first or do I go let my dad inside our house, I don't know what I did first, to be honest, to this day, but he did come in. My mom came home immediately and she said, "You have to leave right now. You can't be here." I found out that he had gone to Hawaii and he did try to get clean, but it didn't stick because he was just trying to do it on his own. The way I understand a drinking problem now and an alcoholic now, I don't know if I necessarily had that awareness at that age. In my mind, I don't remember going, my dad was an alcoholic or was he drunk or not drunk.
Vanessa's dad eventually purchased an old motorhome, parking it at a long-term rental spot at their local fairgrounds, and her parents slowly started to figure out their new normal, with Vanessa going back and forth for visits.
There was about once a week I would go over there to his motorhome, and I see my kids now around that age. You want to be with your friends. That's the stuff you want to be doing. You don't want to be going to your dad's motorhome at the fairgrounds. But I do have some really good memories from that time. I do remember playing cards with him and having so much fun. I remember he had gotten a boom box and he seatbelted it to the back seat of the car. And I was obsessed with Boys to Men during that time. And so he'd play Boys to Men CDs and we'd, drive around. So I have a lot of good memories too. But I also just remember being I have to go stay there. It was just a really hard time to navigate. His drinking continued. One time he came to get me and he was going to take me to get frozen yogurt, which was our thing. And I don't even remember thinking he's drunk. but I remember feeling like I don't want to be in his car right now. And I told him no, which is huge. Like such a big deal for this little 12-year-old me to say no to him. But that was a really hard part that I focused on for many, many years. I felt like I should have said yes and gone with him because that was one of our last chances to be together. So it's just a very core memory of mine. I did go to his house another time after that, and it was a really hard night. He started to tell me how I could fix their marriage, could fix him and my mom. And he's like, you need to start telling her every day that you want us back together. And I just remember crying, and I'm like, I can't, Dad. I can't do that. And I finally got to the point, I was like, I need to go home. I need to go be with my mom. And he was so angry at me. I just remember him being so mad. He just drove me home. It was the middle of the night, and just left and didn't even check to see if my mom was there. And I remember just going around at the doors. My mom was asleep. She eventually woke up, but it was just this really awful night. It just kind of got harder after that. I just remember having these nights with her. It was like we knew this wasn't gonna end well. We knew something was gonna happen, but I didn't know, I don't even think I knew the capacity of somebody to be that sick and that sad, and that they would take their own life.
One night, Vanessa's dad showed up unannounced, trying to force his way inside.
He's banging on all our windows, going around the house. He sees that someone's in bed with my mom, and so then he starts yelling, you've got a man there, who do you have there, And my mom and I get up and we're like, it's me, but my mom can tell he's not rational. His head's not there. It doesn't feel safe and comfortable. And I don't witness this, thank goodness. My mom protected me. Somehow I am in a back room or something, but he tried to hang himself that night outside of our house. And my mom called the police, she called mental health. They come and get him. And at that time, they can only keep him for 24 hours. And then if he wants to go, he can go. So they picked him up that night, they took him, but they called my mom and said, we have to release him now. At the same time, he gets kicked out of the fairgrounds. I don't know what happened, but he's kicked out of the fairgrounds. He needs to park his motorhome somewhere. And my mom says, you can park it at the house, but you need to be actively looking for somewhere else to live. You cannot be inside the house. So this becomes kind of this other new, weird normal. It's parked outside the house. My room is right here. Him and I have a little intercom that we get so we can talk to each other at night. He's still very sick, but my mom's just trying to do whatever she can. She doesn't want him to be homeless. He is still my dad. She's trying to start kind of the process of divorce. Meanwhile, while also supporting and having a full-time job. And so he's living there. I never sleep in it once he's moved there. I come home from school and I maybe go and say hi to him, but then I think I'm just starting to kind of get back into my life a little bit. And then every night we talk on the intercom. My mom finds out at some point that he's been coming into the house. And so she comes home one night and she tells him, you have to move out. You did not respect my boundary. You have to find another place of living. I want you off of the property in 24 hours. It is February 14th, Valentine's Day. And so I remember this whole thing happening with them, and I'm about to go to school, and I have a little Valentine's for him with little candy, cinnamon red hearts. And I give it to him, and I tell him I love him, and we go off to school. And that night we get home, and the motorhome's still there. My mom's frustrated because it was supposed to be gone, and his car's still there. But I get on the intercom, and I'm like, Dad, and he doesn't answer. I think at one point I even go out there and I go to like open the door, but it's stuck shut. I know something's off, but I don't know, like maybe my brain wasn't ready to go there. And the next morning my mom says, I'm gonna call the police. And I'm like, okay, cool, but I'm going to school. I'm going to school, like whatever you need to do, but like we were doing this choir thing. I'm like, I'm going to school today. And so I go to school. And the next thing I know, I'm at school and my teacher calls me out. He doesn't really say much. I don't know if he's like, someone needs to talk to you or what. And I go around the corner and I see my mom and her best friend. And I know immediately, like, I just know. And I just drop. And I don't remember like when they actually told me that he took his life or if I just knew it, but I remember that drive home. I remember the sky. I remember getting there. His motorhome's still there. I go into the house. Like, it's just all just so much. I think anyone who's ever, been through any sort of loss can understand that just like, even though I do know that I think I knew what was about to happen, but I don't think I really knew, that whole day feels like a slow-mo when I think through it.
The next month, another tragedy struck, but this one, no one saw coming.
After he died, my Aunt Karen comes with her little boy. There was a day that they spent the whole day with us, and I remember playing with him. I just remember really, really special days with them. On March 15th, exactly a month later, my little cousin drowned outside of his house. So it was like I had this death, my dad, and then I have this little cousin who is a baby. So like, again, there's that whole processing, like before his mom is dying, he's younger than me. Like none of it makes sense at all. I just remember just being in a fog and really angry. I was angry at God. I was angry. I felt like nobody knew what I was experiencing. I'd like go to school. I remember just being like embarrassed again. Like I don't want to be the center of attention. Like let's just pretend that nothing happened and go back to school. But then I also remember being so angry because then once they'd pretend that nothing happened and they were talking about stuff that just felt so stupid to me, I like was almost mad at them. Like, like you're talking about this stupid drama, like look at the stuff that I'm going through. So it was so hard, and it was so much that I was like processing back and forth.
Her mom knew she needed to get Vanessa professional support. Together, they enrolled in a 12-step program for grief, and she even got Vanessa a personal counselor. But perhaps most impactful to Vanessa's healing during that time was a group therapy session with other kids who had also lost a parent.
I remember to this day, everyone went around the room and said why they were there, and everyone was there because a parent had died. And 3 other people, I remember, like there are so many foggy moments, but I remember like little specific things like this, where 3 people said their parent had died of suicide. And I think that was a really eye-opening part for me, because it was like, I'm not the only person in the world, because I was feeling that way. I was like, I hate everybody. I'm the only person that's going through this. Nobody understands. And it was just kind of a pivotal moment of like, kind of like, obviously I was going through a lot. Like I'm not discrediting that, but like get off your high horse. Like other people are going through stuff too.
The moment you realize you're not alone, simply knowing that, it's like a door cracks open, and suddenly you can start to see a way through the pain. One of the biggest sources of pain for Vanessa was her anger.
I had anger towards my mom. I was mad at her. And that showed itself with not wanting to listen to her. I was definitely angry and mean, and I would fight her, and I would lie to her, and I wouldn't follow her rules. Even though I would say my mom and I had like our ups and downs throughout my teenage years, I would say I did forgive her while I was still living in the house and a teenager. But I had to work through that. And then I was really angry at my dad. I would say I held on to that one for a long time. It is so hard to be the surviving family. There's the layers of feeling like, why did this person leave me? Could I have helped this person? It leaves a lot unanswered. Even if there's a note or not a note, there's still so many questions. I was so mad at him. I didn't understand how he could do that to us, how he could do that to me, why he couldn't have fixed himself, why he couldn't have made himself better. I was so angry at him. And that was for a long time. It took me a long time to actually look back at happy memories. Even though as I got older, I started to understand that he had a mental health problem. I knew he had depression, and I knew he had alcoholism. I knew all that, but I honestly, until 3 years ago, when I was sitting with my therapist, was the first time that I really was able to look at him and go, oh my goodness, he was a sick man. He had a disease, like a cancer. And I so wish that I could have, or somebody could have helped him, but he had to choose, like especially with alcoholism, he had to choose to make that change in his life. And that's not where he was. His brain was too sick.
Vanessa has also found healing and greater empathy for her dad by trying to understand his pain and all the shame he was probably carrying as well.
I think he had carried so much shame. He was adopted. He felt like his own parents had left him, even though he had amazing parents that adopted him. He also would have now been probably diagnosed with a dyslexia or an ADHD. His sister has told me that now. So school was so hard for him growing up. He just felt stupid in school. He also had a marriage before my mom, and he had 2 kids in Texas. And so that was really hard to come to terms with too. I remember one time, once I had reconnected with my brother, I decided to go through some of the photos and send him some. And I remember looking at these pictures and I'm like, this is a beautiful little happy family that he had before me. I mean, I think my brother and my sister came to visit him once in California, and like stayed for a week, and that was it. There was no like weekends with them, or a week, a year with them, nothing. Like he just left them. And then that day and age too, men weren't the ones who stayed home. And I think there was a lot of shame in that. I think there was a lot of shame in that he had hurt his back and he'd had all these surgeries and he couldn't do the things that other dads could do. We look at our parents as kind of like idols. So it's just interesting to think of him as a real person carrying that and having shame, and how hard that might have been sometimes to just show up in life. Yeah.
As an adult now, Vanessa can look back and see the burden her mom carried too, and she has a lot more compassion than she had as a teen.
My mom was incredible. She's incredibly strong, and I really think that she just took everything and supported me as much as she could. I mean, she's like my backbone is what I say about her. We're very, very close. I feel so fortunate that she's my mom. Like, she's just been such an incredible example to me of a strong woman who knew what she needed to do. She knew when she needed to leave my dad. She knew how to show up for me, and I pushed her away, and she still showed up for me every day. And always felt loved for and cared for. And I think a lot of people ask me, like, how are you the person you are today, going through all of that? And I am the person I am because of her, 100% because of her. She shows up for my children in the same way. My daughter Emery calls her counselor. She's just so beautiful and intentional and loving and caring for the people and the things in her life. And then Larry, my stepdad, when they first got together, I was so mean and so cruel to this man in high school. I mean, I remember a time when I didn't even talk to him because I was mad at him for a couple months, and he just held so much space for my dad in our lives. He recognized that that was my dad and that's the man that raised me, but he just kept showing up as a dad in my life. And it's so beautiful to watch him with my children. He is the only grandpa that is alive, and he's the most amazing papa in their life. And he plays games with them, he plays cards with them, which is always so beautiful when I watch him play cards with the kids, because that was like my thing that I did with my dad. And so it's this beautiful, like, full circle moment all the time to just see him showing up in their lives, like, like not my dad, but kind of my dad, but you know what I mean? Like, just all of that. And when you step into a marriage and it's a widow, you have to still hold space that there was a person there in their life, and that person's almost a part of your relationship. In like a weird way, they're still a part of all that. And he's been so incredible with my mom and I in that respect. And then to watch him with Zach, and same with me, he never tried to replace my dad or Zach's dad. He just showed up and showed up and showed up.
What a gift we give to others when we have a perspective large enough to see their pain. And today, Vanessa is taking that same perspective and showing up for others too. The healing she's done over the last few years has shown her an incredible purpose beneath all the pain she's walked through.
Having gone through what I went through, I just knew how to show up for people when they were in grief. When somebody lost somebody, I just show up. And I'm not afraid of, their darkness. I'm not afraid of crying. I'm not afraid of being there, like, in the rawness. And as I was kind of, my kids are all in school now, and kind of just going through that, like, what would it look like if I were to do something now? And I found an organization here in Spokane called Rise Northwest, which is for children who have lost a parent. And very similar to, like, going back to that oak table with all those kids who had lost parents, it's the exact same thing. They have a mentor. I'm taking over the teens now, which just feels like where I'm meant to be, because I was a teen when my dad died. And then I had never heard of a grief coach, and my own life coach said it to me one day. She said, "You know that you could be a grief coach and you'd be really good at it." But I'm like, I've never even heard of that. And sure enough, it's a thing, and I was so intrigued. For the first time, kind of since I had children, I'm like, this is something I could do. So I started going through looking through all the different courses. I found one that resonated with me the most, and I love learning about our brain. I'm kind of nerdy in that. Like, I love learning, like, how our brain works, how trauma affects different parts of our brain. So you have this thing on your heart. I've done all the things. I've applied for the business license, all that, and then I'm like, I gotta launch this. Like, I actually have to tell people I'm doing this now, And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about when I'm going to start telling people, and I look at the calendar and my dad's birthday is coming up, and I'm like, that's the day. That's the day that I am going to tell the world that I'm doing this. And so on his birthday, I launched Pain into Purpose on my Instagram platform and shared, a little bit about my story and about what I was doing. And I just had so many people, so many amazing people reach out from different parts of my life and like, oh my goodness, Vanessa, you helped me during this time. Vanessa, you are so meant to do this. Vanessa, like, I didn't even know that you had gone through this, and I have had this story. And it was just such like a full circle moment. I feel like grief is a part of me, and it's a part of my life, and it's a part of my story. But I do feel like I'm living my life the way I want to live.